Baby, there's something I've been feeling for a long time, but I never knew how to say it properly because some feelings are too deep for simple words. But today I'll try. I can't imagine my life without you, and I don't say that lightly. It's not just an emotional sentence, it's something I feel in every part of me. Before you, life was normal. Everything had its place. Everything made sense. But it didn't feel complete. There was always something missing. Something I couldn't explain. Something I didn't even understand. Until you came into my life. And suddenly, everything felt different. Not perfect, but meaningful, not easy, but worth it. You didn't change my life overnight. You didn't come like a storm. You came like calm, slowly, gently, in a way that I didn't even notice at first. But now, I feel it in everything. In the way I think about you, in the way I look for your name on my phone, in the way my mood changes with your presence. You became part of my routine, part of my thoughts, part of my happiness, and now it's impossible to imagine a life where you're not there because it wouldn't feel the same. It wouldn't feel right. You are not just someone I talk to. You are someone who understands me, someone who sees me beyond what I show, someone who makes me feel safe without even trying. And that feeling, it's rare, very rare, because in this world, it's hard to find someone who truly understands you, who listens without judging, who stays without making you feel like you're too much. And you do that without effort, without trying to prove anything. You just are. And that's what makes you special because you didn't just become part of my life, you became part of who I am. And that's why I say I can't imagine my life without you. Not because I am dependent, not because I am weak, but because you brought something into my life that I don't want to lose. Something real, something calm, something that makes everything else feel easier. And maybe that's what love really is, not needing someone to survive, but wanting them so deeply that life without them feels incomplete. And that's exactly how I feel about you, baby. After realizing how important you are to me, there's something I need to admit, something I don't always show, something I sometimes hide behind my calm words. I'm scared, not of you, but of losing you, because when someone becomes this important, they don't just stay in your life, they become part of it, part of your thoughts, part of your peace, part of your everyday happiness. And suddenly, the idea of life without them feels impossible. Sometimes I sit quietly and think about everything, how you became this important, how your presence slowly turned into something I need, and I ask myself, what if one day this changes? What if one day you're not here the same way? What if I have to go back to a life where you're just a memory? And even thinking about that feels heavy because I've experienced emptiness before. But this would feel different because now I know what I would be losing. And that makes it harder because before you I didn't know what I was missing, but now I do, and that changes everything. That's why sometimes I overthink, sometimes I become quiet, sometimes I hold on to your words a little more than I should. Not because I don't trust you, but because I value you. Because when something matters this much, you don't take it lightly. You protect it, you hold it carefully, you try your best not to lose it. And that's what I'm trying to do. Not perfectly, but honestly, because loving someone deeply comes with vulnerability. It means your happiness is no longer only yours. It's connected to someone else. Their presence can calm you, their absence can disturb you, and I feel that every single day. But even with all this fear, I wouldn't change anything because what I feel with you is worth it. Every emotion, every thought, every moment. Because you didn't just come into my life, you changed how I feel about it. You made everything more meaningful, more real, more alive. And now I can't go back to how things were before. Because before everything felt normal. But now everything feels important. Because you are part of it. That's why I don't just want to love you. I want to protect what we have. Not by controlling it, not by forcing it, but by being present, by being real, by choosing you, even when life gets complicated, even when emotions are not easy. Because real love is not about never feeling fear, it's about choosing someone even with that fear. And I choose you not just when everything feels perfect, but even when I'm scared, even when I overthink, even when I don't have the right words, because at the end of everything, there's one truth I can't ignore. I can't imagine my life without you. And that's not just a feeling, it's a reality my heart has accepted. Baby, after everything I've felt, after every thought that kept me awake, there's one thing I understand now. Saying, I can't imagine my life without you, is not about weakness. It's not about depending on someone. It's about recognizing something real, something meaningful, something that changed you, because before you, I lived my life. I handled everything on my own. I didn't need anyone to feel complete, and I still don't. But you didn't make me dependent. You made my life feel fuller, warmer, more alive, and that's the difference. You didn't become my need, you became my choice. A choice I make every day. A choice I want to keep making again and again. Because love is not about not being able to live without someone. It's about wanting them in your life even when you know you could survive without them. And I could survive. But I don't want to just survive. I want to live. And living with you in my life feels better, feels real, feels complete in a way I never understood before. That's why when I say I can't imagine my life without you, what I really mean is this. I don't want a life where you are just a memory. I don't want a future where you are just a story I tell. I don't want to look back and think, what if we tried harder? What if we didn't let this go? Because what we have is not something I want to lose without a fight. Not in a toxic way, not in a desperate way, but in a real way, a way where both hearts choose each other, where both people try, where both people stay, because real love is not about holding on alone, it's about building something together. And that's what I want with you. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, but something honest, something strong, something that lasts even through difficult days, even through misunderstandings, even through moments where things don't feel easy. Because those moments, they don't break real love, they test it, and I'm ready for that. With you, because you are not just someone I love. You are someone I want to grow with, someone I want to understand more every day, someone I want to keep choosing, no matter how life changes. So today, I don't say this out of fear. I don't say this out of insecurity. I say this with clarity, with calmness, with truth. Baby, I can imagine a life without you, but I don't want it because a life with you feels like something worth choosing every single day, and that's what makes it real. I am lucky to be in love with you, not because you are perfect, not because our story is flawless, not because destiny made everything easy. I am lucky because loving you changed me. This is my confession. The first time I saw you, it wasn't dramatic. No slow motion, no background music. Just a normal afternoon in Karachi. The sun was harsh, the traffic was loud, and life was moving the way it always does. You were standing near the gate, adjusting your dupatta, slightly annoyed at something on your phone. I don't know what happened in that moment, but something inside me became calm. Not excited, not obsessed, just calm, and that scared me because I am not someone who believes in instant connections. I overthink, I analyze, I doubt. But with you, there was no noise in my head, just peace. We started talking casually. At first, it was about work, about studies, about random daily complaints, but slowly our conversations grew longer. Messages that started with "Hi" ended at 2 a.m. with "You sleep first." You once told me you're not very expressive. You were right. I was never good with big romantic dialogues. I wasn't the type to promise the moon. I wasn't the best option in any obvious way. But when I started falling for you, something changed. I became honest, painfully honest, because loving you didn't feel like a competition. It felt like gratitude. You see, before you, I thought love was about impressing, because love should not feel like constant confusion. It should not feel like one person trying while the other is drifting away. It should not leave you questioning your worth. And now, when I look back at everything, I don't feel anger. I don't feel regret. I just feel understanding. You were a part of my story, an important part, but not the final one. So, yes, I didn't want to lose you, but maybe losing you was necessary. Necessary for me to find myself again. Necessary for me to grow. Necessary for me to learn what love truly means. And maybe one day, when I meet someone who truly stays, I will finally understand why this had to end. Until then, I carry the memories, not as pain, but as lessons, and I move forward, not broken, but stronger than before.